Silence, but not peace. That kind of silence that feels like a breath held too long. A pause before the storm, eyes locked, minds racing. They've been watching, not because they cared, but because they doubted. For months, they circled around you like vultures over something they assumed was done. You were written off, a ghost in your own story, just a shadow in a world that glorifies noise. But what they never knew was that you were building in the dark, bleeding in the background, smiling through broken teeth. They thought they had time to forget you, but now they're scrambling to remember, because suddenly you're in the room, not invited, not welcomed, but undeniable. You didn't break the door down, you made the whole room feel like you were the center all along. This isn't a story about noise. This is a story about pressure, and what happens when pressure meets silence and creates a monster they can't ignore anymore. You're not here to impress, you're here to remind. To every eye watching, every whisper spoken, every corner where your name was mocked, you made it. Without asking, without explaining, without warning. Now they want you in the room, but this time you set the rules. This is twist mind. This is power in its quietest, deadliest, most surgical form. You thought they didn't notice. You thought you were invisible. But the truth? They were always watching. Silently, carefully, like scientists observing a creature they couldn't fully understand. Every time you sat alone, every time you walked out without saying a word, every time you showed up with pain behind your eyes but fire still in your chest, they were watching, not clapping, not cheering, just watching, waiting, hoping secretly that you'd crack, that you'd snap, that you'd vanish under the weight they saw you carrying. But you didn't. You kept walking through storms with no umbrella. You stitched yourself up in silence, while they thought you were breaking. But you weren't breaking. You were becoming the one they'd eventually fear. You see, the eyes were always there, in the corners of rooms, behind fake smiles, within conversations you were never invited to. They were collecting data on your downfall, but what they recorded shocked them. They saw evolution. They saw a transformation they couldn't interrupt. You were underestimated, not because you were weak, but because your strength wasn't loud, because your silence confused them, because you didn't beg for attention, because your eyes didn't scream for help, because you never played their game. And in a world addicted to noise, your stillness screamed the loudest. So they watched, and watched, and watched some more. And the longer they observed you, the more they realized you weren't ordinary. You weren't meant to be one of them. You weren't meant to blend in. You weren't hiding. You were studying, just like them. You were watching them watching you. And while they thought you were stuck, you were designing your next move, quietly, brilliantly, strategically. Because those who carry real power don't parade it. The eyes on you were never friendly, never warm, but they were fascinated. Because even when you were drowning, you looked calm. Even when everything was collapsing inside you, you moved like a soldier on a mission. They took notes on how you walked, how you didn't flinch, how you didn't cry in front of them. They wanted to know what kind of fire burns that quietly. And they couldn't find it. Because the truth is, what you carry can't be copied, can't be decoded. It was built in darkness, in places no one followed you into. So while they had the luxury of comfort and approval, you had the hunger of someone who had nothing left to lose. That hunger scared them. They told themselves you were unimportant. That's how they kept their egos safe. But deep down, even they knew there was something off about you, something wild, something unstable in the best way, something unpredictable. And that's why they never looked away, because they were waiting for a sign, a crack, a weakness. But instead, you turned into something else, a force, a storm they couldn't map, a rhythm they couldn't predict. Now those same eyes are wide open, not just watching, but wanting you in the room, wanting to understand what you became. But it's too late, because by the time they realized you were a threat, you already built the power they can't destroy. So remember this, they were always watching, but they watched the wrong thing. They watched your silence and mistook it for surrender. They watched your stillness and confused it with weakness. They watched your pain and thought it was your end. But what they never saw was the rebirth happening inside you. That silent, slow, soul-splitting rebirth that turned you from overlooked into unstoppable. They never heard your first screams. They never noticed your first fall. Because you were born far from their spotlight, deep in the shadows, where the broken things grow, where the forgotten are left to rot or rise. No one handed you a map. No one gave you a head start, while others were born into applause, into comfort, into love. You were born into silence. Cold, heavy, and endless. But that silence didn't swallow you. It shaped you. That darkness didn't drown you. It became your element. You didn't get to learn life the easy way. You had to claw your way through it, bleeding, crawling, starving. But you kept going. You didn't wait to be saved. You became your own salvation. Born without a guide, without a witness, without a cheerleader, you still rose. They never saw the nights where you buried your face in your own arms because nobody else was there to hold you. They don't know what it's like to feel invisible even in a crowded room, to scream on the inside and have no one hear a thing. They didn't see the battles you fought without armor, without backup, without mercy, and yet you survived. You adapted. You built strength where others would have crumbled. They would have shattered if they had even tasted a fraction of your struggle. But you made a home in hell and called it a starting point. That's not weakness. That's not trauma. That's power. Unforgiving, relentless, God-level power. People like you don't come from comfort. You come from chaos. And that chaos trained you. It became your school, your forge, your training ground. While others cried over insults, you were busy fighting for survival. While they quit when things got tough, you were already neck deep in the impossible. You've seen worse. You've endured the worst. So now when the world tries to intimidate you with fear, with pressure, with pain, you laugh. Because nothing they throw at you compares to what you've already lived through. Nothing shakes someone who was born in the shadows. You don't flinch, you focus. They hate that about you. That unbothered silence. That haunted look in your eye that says, I've been through worse. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't break under pressure, someone who doesn't crumble when they're left alone. But they don't understand what you've become. You're not here to improve. You're not here to fit in. You're here to change the temperature of the room. Because when someone grows up in the dark, they don't fear the light. They own it. You didn't have mentors. You didn't have handouts. You didn't have people paving the path for you. Everything you are, you built it with trembling hands. Tear-soaked nights, and a kind of pain that would have broken 10 other people. That's why you walk differently. That's why you speak like your voice has roots in fire. That's why your silence screams louder than their noise. Because behind that silence is a history of survival, of reinvention, of walking through fire without flinching. You're not a product of luck. You're the result of pure resilience. You weren't created by love. You were sculpted by pressure, by betrayal, by abandonment. You're not gentle. You are raw muscle and memory. You are sharpened instincts and calculated rage. You are everything they never expected to survive. And now that you've emerged whole, alive, more dangerous than ever. They don't know whether to welcome you or get out of your way. You were born in the shadows, and that's your advantage. Because now when they turn the spotlight on you, thinking it'll expose your flaws, it only reveals your fire. A fire they can't handle. A fire they didn't see coming, because they forgot something vital. The ones born in the dark are the hardest to burn. Pain, that word alone makes most people flinch. They run from it, hide from it, deny it. But not you. You stared pain in the face and didn't blink, because while they were busy avoiding their demons, you sat with yours. You listened, you learned. You didn't just survive pain, you studied it, turned it inside out. You made it your teacher, and slowly, brick by bloody brick, you built your entire blueprint out of it. You used your hurt as a hammer, your heartbreak as fuel. Every scar you carry isn't just a reminder, it's a signature of someone who refused to stay down. They don't get it. They never will. Because you didn't just feel pain, you engineered it into power. You've been through things they'll never understand, and that's your edge. While they were busy living in comfort, you were walking barefoot across emotional glass. You were picking up the pieces of yourself with shaking hands, designing a new version of you without even knowing it. They looked at your silence and saw emptiness, but they missed the plans forming behind your eyes. Plans built from disappointment, betrayal, loneliness. They thought pain was destroying you, but it was drafting blueprints clearer than any dream, stronger than any motivation. You didn't need inspiration. You had agony. You had pressure. You had darkness as your drawing board. Every time someone left you, you gained something deeper. Every time life slammed the door on you, you carved another one yourself. While they ran from the fire, you walked into it. You let it burn everything you thought you were. And what came out on the other side wasn't soft, wasn't fragile, it was forged. You don't carry trauma. You carry architecture. And every single part of you now is mapped, measured, and reinforced by the pain you once wished would end. This is the part they won't understand. They'll look at you now and wonder how you became so composed, so cold, so collected. But they don't realize what you've buried, what you've rewritten. You didn't just survive heartbreak, you turned it into blueprints for fortress. You didn't just survive humiliation, you turned it into the foundation of a kingdom. Every late night of overthinking, every breakdown no one saw, every tear that dried on your skin like armor, it's all part of the plan now, the master plan. Because you were never just hurting, you were evolved. And the more they doubted you, the sharper your blueprint became. The more they ignored you, the more intricate your structure grew. Until one day you didn't just rise, you revealed what they never expected. A version of you so precise, so dangerous, so unshakably clear in purpose. It silenced them. They used to mock your silence. Now they're terrified by what that silence produced. Because pain is raw, but what you did with it, that was art. You turned it into precision. You weaponized it. And now every step you take is calculated. Every word you say is measured. Every breath you take is intentional. You've become something they never saw coming. A strategist, a shadow architect, someone who knows every crack in the wall, because you were buried in them once. So when they invite you into the room now, know this: they don't want your opinion. They want to understand how you built yourself from ruin. They want to decode the formula you forged in agony. But it's too late. The blueprint is etched in your bones and no one else can read it. Because it wasn't written in comfort, it was drawn in blood. They thought it was over for you. They spoke about you in past tense, used to be, almost made it could have been something. And you let them. You let the whispers grow. You let the noise swell. You let them create their little myths about your failure, your silence, your so-called end. And you said nothing. Not because you were weak, but because you were busy. Reconstructing, reloading, rewriting every part of yourself they tried to erase. You weren't finished, you were just paused, quietly becoming the threat they didn't see coming. While they celebrated your absence, you were sharpening your return. You weren't hiding, you were healing. And healing isn't pretty, it's brutal, it's messy. It's war against the parts of you they tried to kill. But you fought that war alone. In silence, in the dead hours when no one was watching. And you won. Not with applause, not with validation, but with discipline. With fire, with pain forged into patience. You were never gone, you were in the lab re-engineering your soul into something lethal. So when you returned different, colder, cleaner, they didn't recognize you. That's how you knew you did it right. You weren't the same, you didn't laugh the same, didn't flinch the same, didn't care the same. They looked at you and saw a ghost of someone they once underestimated, but now with armor. Now with clarity. Now with edge. And the scariest part, you didn't come back to prove them wrong. You came back to prove yourself right. And that's when the game flipped, tried to bait you back into your old patterns. Tried to use the same tricks. Same guilt, same control. But you weren't on that level anymore. You had leveled up. You weren't playing for recognition. You were playing for legacy. And legacies aren't built through noise. They're carved through resilience. Quiet, sharp, deliberate resilience, the kind that walks back into the room and makes everyone hold their breath. That's what you became. A presence, a signal, a warning that just because someone disappears doesn't mean they're done. They say success is the best revenge, but they got it wrong. The best revenge is silence that comes back stronger. It's not a scream, it's a stare. A presence so powerful it shuts down every lie ever told about you. They made stories. You made moves. They made noise. You made history. And now they're realizing it too late. You didn't just bounce back. You detonated. You became the plot twist no one predicted. The villain in their story that never begged to be understood. You stopped waiting for respect. You took it. Stopped waiting to be seen, you became impossible to ignore. That's not a comeback, that's a reinvention. And it shattered the version of you they were comfortable with. Now when you enter the room, it's not about being accepted, it's about reminding them you survived everything they hoped would break you. And now you're unshakable. Power doesn't always walk in shouting. Sometimes it slips through the door in silence. No grand entrance, no announcement, just presence. Still, heavy, sharp enough to cut through tension without a word. That's the power you carry now, not because you trained to be loud, but because you mastered control. You don't need to raise your voice to dominate. You don't need to make noise to shake the ground. You've become the kind of power that makes people adjust themselves without understanding why. You used to think power looked like applause, like popularity, like being the center of attention. But now you know real power is being able to walk into a room full of people who once doubted you, and never feeling the need to say a word. You don't need to explain yourself, you don't need to prove yourself. You exist in such a precise state of self-control, your energy speaks louder than any voice could. That's what frightens them now. That quiet force behind your eyes. That calm they can't decode. Because people are used to loud, they're used to dramatics. Outbursts. Emotional explosions. But you learn to sit with the storm. You learn to build in silence. To grow behind the curtain. And now your silence has weight. It has sharpness. It makes people rethink their choices. You're no longer reacting, you're calculating. No more wasted emotion. No more trying to explain yourself to those who were never listening anyway. Your silence now commands the room, and they feel it. They say still waters run deep. But you're a still ocean with monsters underneath. They can sense it, that beneath the calm face there's war, that behind the measured words, there's a mind that's already 3 moves ahead. That's what power really is. Mystery wrapped in confidence. And you've mastered it. You're not here to be loud. You're here to be legendary, and the most powerful part, you don't care if they get it. You're done seeking validation. You're done being readable. Let them guess. Let them wonder. Because in that wondering, they lose control. You hold the silence. You hold the stare. You hold the damn room, and they'll feel that forever. Because true power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply walks in and changes everything. They thought you were done, finished. Nothing more than a fading chapter in their boring little story. You disappeared, and they assumed you'd stay gone. But they never understood what silence truly means. Not your kind of silence. Because while they laughed, you listened. While they celebrated your downfall, you studied every move they made. Every cruel smirk, every betrayal, every moment they thought they were superior etched deep into your mind like war markings. You weren't hiding, you were preparing, not to return as who you were, but as something they can't even define. A force, a warning, a storm. You see, peace was never the plan. You didn't survive hell just to forgive. You didn't claw your way out of the abyss to hold hands and sing songs of reconciliation. You came back to take what's yours with fire in your lungs and fury in your hands. There's something terrifying about someone who has nothing left to lose, because that person becomes unstoppable. That's what you are now. You burned in the silence, broke in the shadows, and stitched yourself back together with wire and rage. You're not healed. You're reconstructed. And every scar is a weapon. Every failure, a blueprint. Every insult, fuel. You returned because the world made a mistake. They left you behind thinking you were weak. But they forgot what happens when you feed a mind like yours with pain. It mutates. It becomes a machine. And now that machine is awake, calculating, moving through the chaos with no fear, no mercy, and no intention of fading again. Power doesn't announce itself with a trumpet. It moves through the room like electricity, silent but felt. That's what your return is, not loud but deadly. They'll feel it before they see it. That shift in the air. That tension crawling up their spine. They'll turn, and there you'll be. Not a ghost, not a whisper, but a reckoning. They'll remember every time they look down on you, every word they used to cut you open, and in that moment they'll understand. You never disappeared. You evolved. You built a kingdom in the ruins they left you in. And now you've returned, not to ask for a seat at the table, but to flip the whole damn thing. There is no going back. There's no more pleasing anyone. No more explaining yourself. You're not here to fit in. You're here to rise. Not with kindness, but with clarity. Not with apologies, but with power. You didn't survive to be quiet. You didn't bleed just to bow. You came back to claim everything they said you couldn't have. And this time it's not about revenge. It's about balance. It's about making the world see what it tried so hard to erase. Your strength, your mind, your will. They're undeniable now. Let them feel uncomfortable. Let them whisper behind your back. Let them run out of rooms when you enter. That's what power does. It exposes weakness. You don't owe them anything. Not a smile, not a nod, not even your silence. Your presence alone is a statement now. And those who counted you out will soon realize the game has changed. And you're not just back, you're in control. For so long they watched you. Not out of admiration, but calculation. They studied your silence like it was a weakness. They analyzed your movements like scientists, observing a fragile experiment. Every time you hesitated, every moment you held your tongue, they thought they were learning how to defeat you. Like you were some formula to crack, a predictable rhythm they could dance around. What they didn't realize is this: you were letting them study the old version of you. You allowed them access to the prototype, not the weapon you were becoming. They were so focused on the pattern that they missed the transformation. They thought you were still solving yourself, but you were already rewriting the entire equation. You became unreadable by design. While they played checkers, you learned the chaos of chess. And then you broke the board altogether. No more linear moves, no more logic they can trace. You shifted into something that doesn't fit their prediction. You're not a path, you're a storm. And the truth is they can't prepare for storms. They don't get studied, they arrive, they destroy, and they leave everything changed. They wanted you to stay in a box, to be understandable, manageable, comfortable. They wanted your growth to be visible, controllable, easy to digest. But real transformation, it's violent, it's invisible. It happens in silence, in solitude, in moments of deep rage and even deeper clarity. You became dangerous not because you got louder, but because you became unfathomable, because you embraced unpredictability, because you stopped explaining yourself and started moving like someone who doesn't owe anyone an answer. The same people who studied you now flinch when you speak. They can't read you anymore. They can't tell where you're going, what you're planning, what you're capable of. And that terrifies them, because when someone becomes unpredictable, they become uncontrollable. And that's your new power. You no longer react. You disrupt. You no longer answer. You redirect. You no longer absorb energy. You twist it. And that's what they never prepared for. A version of you that they can't decode, can't manipulate, and sure as hell can't stop. You're not some riddle to be solved. You're a force to be reckoned with. You've earned the right to move without explanation, to vanish and reappear at full velocity, to hit where they least expect. They tried to use your mind against you, but you turned your mind into a battlefield, one that only you know how to navigate. You are the plot twist they didn't see come, the chaos they can't manage, the answer they no longer understand. And now you show them what it looks like when the storm they thought they could control becomes the one that erases them. No mercy, no warnings, just power. That quiet, burning power that doesn't seek revenge, but delivers consequences. You don't owe them rage or kindness. You owe them truth. And the truth is, you were never the puzzle. You were always the storm. You just needed time to gather. You've gathered. Now it's time to move.